In this presentation, we'll look at the scientific method, what are hypotheses and theories, and how to generate a research hypothesis to guide your experiments. So let's start with a quick refresher on the scientific method. You should notice both from your textbook and from Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance that the scientific method is actually something we probably do all the time without really thinking about it. After we make an observation about some natural phenomenon, we often ask, why does that happen? Or how does that happen? The next stage, formulating a hypothesis, is often very difficult. Many students are taught to think of a hypothesis as an educated guess, but this doesn't really get at the true value of a hypothesis. I can make an educated guess about the sum of two dice, but making an educated guess like that doesn't, in itself, lead to any greater understanding of the dice. Instead of an educated guess, think of a hypothesis as a possible explanation. When you ask why or how something happens, you want an explanation. In order to figure out whether your hypothesis is supported or refuted, you need to devise an experiment. Once you've figured out what your experiment is going to be, you should predict what the result would be if your explanation, your hypothesis, is correct. When you design an experiment, you should think very carefully about any potential outcomes. Ideally, if your hypothesis is true, you should predict one outcome, and if it's not true, you should predict something quite different and distinct. After you test a hypothesis and your data support that hypothesis, it often gets tested in new ways by other scientists. As more and more evidence builds that supports the hypothesis, it may get reworked into what we call a theory. Now, a theory and a hypothesis are very similar in that both are explanations. The differences lie in that a theory has stood the test of time and has been tested many, many times from many different angles. Hypotheses also tend to be relatively narrow in their scope, dealing with perhaps a particular organism or a very particular behavior. Theories, on the other hand, are broad explanations that have been supported in a wide variety of situations. For example, the theory of evolution deals with change at many different levels and for all species. We sometimes hear somebody say that something may not be true or may not be believable because it's, well, just a theory. This also takes the form of, theoretically, X should work, though I kind of doubt it. This vernacular usage of the word implies that it may be or is likely to be wrong. However, in biology, a theory is the pinnacle of our understanding, and because it's so well tested, we rely on them to make predictions about new experiments. For example, an architect who understands the theory of gravity and how gravity affects large buildings doesn't have to develop the ideas herself. She can use the theory to make predictions about her own work. The last thing I'd like to say about hypotheses and theories is that they need to be falsifiable. That is, there needs to be some possibility that they're wrong. We usually get into trouble with this falsifiability requirement when we invoke non-natural or supernatural forces. Hypotheses that invoke supernatural beings or forces, such as ghosts or God, are, by definition, outside of nature. That's what supernatural means. And therefore, they can't be tested by the scientific method. In our class, I want you to learn to formulate a research hypothesis. These are useful for training our thoughts and becoming laser-focused on whether the experiment we'd like to do will actually support or refute a hypothesis. For our purposes, research hypotheses have a very rigid format. We say, if my hypothesis is true, and I test it using this method, then I predict that I will get such and such results. Your textbook uses an example of a flashlight not working to develop hypotheses as to why it's broken. Using a research hypothesis, you might say, if the battery is discharged, or dead, and I replace the battery with a new one, then the flashlight will work. Notice that the hypothesis statement is an explanation of why the flashlight does not work. After the and statement, I put the test that we do. We replace the battery with a new one. After the then part, we make a prediction as to what will happen if the hypothesis is true, and we do that test. In this example, we're interested in why birds make the long, dangerous journey from Central and South America to North America. We might reason that they migrate to escape parasites that are common in the south. So we might say, if birds fly north in the summer to avoid parasites, and we count the number of parasites on migratory and non-migratory species, then we will find that the migratory species have the higher parasite counts. Note that this might not be the only explanation for why birds migrate. It's possible that birds migrate because there's more food in North America during the summer than they would find in South America. So it's entirely possible that more than one hypothesis may be true. Finally, note that although the test that we propose ideally should clearly distinguish between a supported and unsupported hypothesis, this sometimes isn't possible, especially in complex systems. In this case, we might find that the two species we are looking at both have equal parasite loads, but one may be more susceptible to those parasites than the other. So simply measuring the parasite load doesn't adequately address the effects of the parasites on the birds. Your results may lend weight to your hypothesis, but it lacks the definitiveness of the example with the flashlight. Developing research hypotheses, even simple ones, is very, very difficult. You should practice making your own research hypotheses using this format. It's a difficult skill, and we'll get some practice doing it in our lab.